Hey, this is Alex Bach, and we're back again with another episode of Bowhunters of Wyoming. And today I've got a super special guest on. I'm really pumped to have him, our very own past president, Mr. Tom Hurley. Tom, thanks for jumping on today, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you bet. Happy to be here, Alex.
Heck yeah. So first and foremost, Tom, being the past president, I know you've had quite a history with Bow and you've done a lot. So I think what I want to start with is how did you first get involved with Bowhunters of Wyoming? Where did it all start?
Yeah, so, man, it just started as honestly a guy's trip back in the day. When I got to college, I went to Sheridan College and met Sam Davis and Zach DeWitt and got in with those guys and became good friends. I actually grew up with Zach DeWitt when we were really little. Our dads worked together and we knew each other, and then our dads went different careers and we hadn't seen each other in 10, 12 years or something. And we met back in college. And, so I started hanging out with those guys and Zach Harnish as well. And, Sam's dad was one of the founders of Bowhunters of Wyoming. And so he was very adamant that we would go to that. And, they had got me into bow hunting. I grew up hunting, but they kind of got me into it. And so I was like, okay, I'll go with these guys. And we were just honestly, for me back then, it was just a road trip with the guys and having fun, drinking beer and, going to the bow hunting conventions. And that's really how just getting involved with bow started as far as going.
It doesn't sound like it gets really any more organic than that. Sounds like a great way to start getting involved. And honestly, it sounds like a lot of fun. As I guess time progressed, Tom, in your involvement with Bowhunters of Wyoming continued, what inspired you to eventually take on a leadership role within the group?
Yeah, so, after, a decade or maybe a little longer of just having a good time with it, I just, more and more involved with bow hunting and the game and fish meetings and all the things. I also, I guess also at the same time had, grown in my business career and gotten more involved with the company I worked for in growing a business and the marketing and just business development portions. And I really enjoyed that. And so I kind of had this, things happening at the same time there where it was like, hey, I'm learning all these skills in business and I really like this organization and man, I think I can apply some of this. And so I originally stepped up and started with public relations, kind of marketing and social media, and started doing that for a couple of years, as well as helping with, at that point, we had a convention in Sheridan. And so I helped on the convention committee, and then just that got me pretty involved. And I did that for a couple of years. And then we had a vacancy in our secretary position, and basically I had zero interest in doing that, but it was at a convention and I kind of got nominated on the floor by Susan Barrett.
It's hard to say no to Susan.
Yeah. So it was like, well, okay, I guess, yeah, I can do that. And I'm the worst person to be a secretary because my note taking is atrocious. And I let them know that, but I was willing to do it. So I stepped up and did that. And then it just snowballed from there, I guess.
That's a pretty awesome start, Tom. Was that convention up in Sheridan, I'm guessing? Because you guys have a pretty strong, there's a stronghold of Bowhunters of Wyoming members up in Sheridan, it seems.
There really is. Both, obviously we have mentioned Susan. Her and Mike have been just stalwarts of the organization for over 20 years. But there's a lot of other people, and actually our recent Area 3 rep, Rick Parrish, was down in the Cheyenne area, I believe.
Yep.
And then, a few years ago moved up here. And so it was another very active, a former president, former Bowhunter of the Year, just another guy really involved that came up here to the Sheridan area. So we really do have a really good group up here that's really involved. That's where that banquet was, and kind of, I'm sure, had to do with me caving to the pressure to run. So
yeah, probably didn't help. But either way, I'm excited, for our upcoming banquet in Sheridan, kind of witness that firsthand. I think we're going to get a pretty good turnout. So as far as, because Tom, you started as secretary and then you eventually took on the president role. When you Was there anything in between, or was it just straight from secretary to president?
Yeah, it's secretary to president. That was another one where Harvey, past president before me, had been president for, I think at that point, maybe say 3 years. And he was looking to step down, pass the torch on. We've had really this handful or generation. It's not just one generation, but we've had an older group of people who have held this organization together and, done the lion's share of the work for decades. And there'd been a big push from those people that they wanted to see some younger people, some different people step up instead of the same, say, 10 to 20 people that kept doing everything, cycling through those same people to take all the positions. And so Harvey had kind of, brought it up to me a couple times, and he wasn't wanting to run anymore. He would have stayed on, I believe, if nobody stepped up, but he'd asked me, and I wanted to I didn't think I was ready. I didn't think I knew enough. Some of the president before him was Steve Martin, and I can't remember how many years Steve was president, like 10.
Oh, wow. So he was president quite a while.
Yeah, a long time. And so it was, like, man, do I know enough about the organization? Am I the person? I don't know. I still felt so new to it. So I wanted to be vice president for a few years, but Joel Hank was willing to be vice president, but was adamant he wouldn't be president. And I just was talking to a few people, and, I talked about it at the convention, but Neil Perkins, I just remember that conversation for whatever reason. He just told me, Tom, no one's ever ready to step up and, take something on like that. It's just, you just have to do it. Just jump in with both feet, and we'll all be here to support you, and you just have to do it. And so that conversation, I talked to a ton of people, the Barretts and Jason Stafford and Ron Najal, and just some of the members have been around forever, and Rick Parrish, and just said, what do you guys think? And they all said, yeah, do it. And so I just decided to throw my hat in the ring. And it's a funny story. We're driving to Casper, me and my wife. My young son was in the car, and I was on the phone with Joel talking about it, and said, okay, man, I'll do it. I'll be president, blah, blah, blah. Hung up, and my wife she's driving. She just looks over at me and goes, excuse me? I was like, what? And she goes, did you just volunteer to be president of the organization and not have a conversation? I was like, well, I was going to bring it up eventually. And,
but it just happened to be now. So
yeah, sorry, I forgot to tell you, but no, and she's been great with it, but she was like, hey, I thought maybe we would talk about that as family before you just decided to do that.
Up
but
and agree, because it's a time commitment, as you could attest to. It's kind of a big deal. And did you find that it worked out the way you thought it was? I know, you said, I don't know if I'm ready for that, and I went through the same thing. Did you find it was harder than you thought it was going to be, or easier than it was going to be?
It's probably a little of both. I'm very ambitious, and I don't think that I'm great at a lot of things, but I want everything I do to be great.
Right.
And so I had big dreams when I stepped up, and it was like, okay, what can we do? What would be better? What would help the organization? And I just had all this motivation and stuff. And so I probably made some things harder than they needed to be, especially right out of the gate. But in reality, most of it, it can be as simple as you want. Like, the organization can kind of just keep trucking how it is without a whole lot of turbulence, and things are going to be just fine. I think, I'm not going to speak to your goals and plans, but, you've kind of talked about some of them, and they're real similar to what I had coming in, a lot of them, which is exciting for me that we can kind of keep some of that stuff going. But, it's just, I think, incremental improvements, and not trying to. I had to realize I wasn't in business, and this wasn't my full-time job, and
right.
It's nobody else's. And so while at the time too, I was going through a career change, actually left my job that I had and went out on my own. And in the meantime, I had quite a bit more time on my hands when I jumped into it. As so did Hannah, our secretary, and she's since changed careers too. But me and Hannah, for quite a while there, put a tremendous amount of time into the organization. And as Susan always does, so that's almost just a given for anyone that knows Susan. And so we kind of had
she's
three
amazing.
of us that were just getting after it. And then, I've had to come to the realization that that's not, for a complete nonprofit, for anyone listening who doesn't know, nobody takes any pay or anything. This is 100% volunteer hours. And so you start trying to get a lot of people to put in tons of hours, and that probably gets a little bit too much. We got a lot of great people, but people have jobs and families and everything. And so this past year was, I was kind of realizing that, toning things back a little bit just to try and keep things going good and don't burn anyone out. And, then eventually I knew I was stepping down and you were stepping up. And so then I didn't want to make, any wholesale changes or anything crazy. And so it was great. There's lots of ups and downs, but overall, it was really good. So, yeah,
well, you did a good job, Tom, and it was cool for me to watch you kind of do what you do and run the organization. And I'm glad you brought up, it's 100% volunteer. Our entire executive council, all of our elected officers, 100% volunteer. And I think you really hit the nail on the head where you can make this as labor intensive as you want, or you can make this as step back as you want. And I think you and I are very much alike in, well, I want to be the best and I want to do the best and I want to make both the best, which can quickly spiral out of control, especially when you are working a full-time job, because this takes time, and we all have families, we all have jobs. But like I said, it was fun watching you and being able to kind of model what I want to continue our organization to do based on what you've done. So I appreciate that, man. And looking back, I guess, from your time as president, from your time as secretary, is there anything that really jumps out at you that kind of says, oh man, I'm glad we were able to do that, or that one time when we did X, Y, and Z event, that went really well? Are there any of those things that jump out as you look back?
I would say the main one is just the amount of money we've been able to raise at our banquets.
Yes.
Or maybe not the main one, but a big one. When I first got involved with the banquets, a lot of them were bringing in sub $10,000, or maybe all or most of them had. And a little history of our organization, it started small. And for a long time, we weren't the membership and everything. And this isn't a slight at anyone. This is just the way things were. And, it wasn't this big to do of a banquet. It was really for a long time more about the convention, more about, the people getting together. The money, the fundraising was there, but it wasn't necessarily the focal point, which I think there's some good to that for sure.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So when I started getting involved, I kind of, being a business person, was like, well, if we're going to raise money, let's raise some money. Like, let's get some money for this organization so we can have a bigger impact, so we can do more. And again, not to pay any of us, but to, produce a better product for our customers per se, for our members, and to make more impact on the ground with the dollars we put back into conservation. And so, we jumped up to, the last couple have all been, I believe, over $30,000 in revenue that we've brought in. And so that's a pretty good jump in a short window of time. So that was great. And I really like that because it just allows us to do more. And then the one I've gotten the most compliments on, which I guess I pushed it and had the idea, but I have very little to do with the execution of it, would be our magazine. And going from the black and white paper, basically newsletter we had, to a full color magazine. I've gotten so much feedback from members about that and how much they really like that. So that one's probably the most tangible one as far as membership goes, that we could say, hey, we went to this full color magazine and people really, really enjoy it.
Yeah, that's a big deal because that stepped the magazine up, right on par with any of the other big ones you see. And I'm glad you brought up that funding, as president. What did we pull in on this last one? It was almost $40,000, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yep. I know I saw the numbers, but over 30. I don't know exactly where it tallied out, but
ended up being just shy of 40, which for those who don't know, that all goes back to conservation projects in the state of Wyoming. So yeah, I think those are two things you can certainly hang your hat on. In your own words, I guess, Tom, when it comes to Bowhunters of Wyoming, and you've done a great job kind of telling us how it became such a big deal for you and your involvement. Why do you think it's important for today's hunting community, specifically in Wyoming, that we carry on, I guess, Bow's mission, for lack of a better term?
I think, Bow, our membership, our kind of people who carried this organization for so long, that next older generation above us that has been around forever and stuff, and the things that they accomplished and the impact they've had on different things at the game and fish level, at the state level, through not only our donations, but our work at the legislature and at the commission has been probably more profound than people realize. We have one of the most active memberships, and, kind of, because they're not all on executive council or committees anymore, but just diehard members that are attending every single commission meeting, that are involved with the legislator. We have a pretty big voice, especially for the size of our organization, when it comes to those things. And you'll probably get a lot of these calls as president now, but all sorts of organizations, and top level people at these big organizations, NGOs, or the state, game and fish, whatever, reaching out, getting our opinion, getting our thoughts on things. And so it's more than just a bow hunting brotherhood. It really is, from an impact standpoint, an important organization. And part of that, I think, comes from, to be a really good bow hunter, to be a successful bow hunter, especially on the trad side, which we have a lot of traditional archers, traditional bow hunters in our membership. Mm-hmm. The dedication and almost psychotic, like, you have to be a crazy person. You have to be crazy dedicated and obsessed with what we're doing. And because of that, I just truly believe we have one of the most passionate groups of hunters and sports people and conservationists of any group out there. We, obviously there's people that aren't, that way with bow hunting, and it's not just every single members or every single person bow hunts. It's not their entire life. There's so many of us that, there are. And I always think it's funny, like, if you asked me how I identified, right? Politics and 25 and everything else. Like, what do you identify as? Yeah. Not that I would ever really identify as anything, but, like, more than anything outside of being a husband and a father and stuff, but, like, as my own person, like, I'm a bow hunter. And that's literally what I live for. And that's what so many of our members live for. And I think that's different than a lot of hunting organizations. Not to say somebody who shoots a rifle can't, live for that, but I just think it's a more concentrated, passionate group. And with that, we just have a lot of effort from our organization toward all the different things, be it improving archery seasons or, working at the legislative level or whatever it might be. And on one last thing on that, I guess, is just when you get to be part of the organization, people, the successful bow hunters who have done it for decades and decades, that you get to be friends with, and you get to pick their brains and learn from them. If you're a new bow hunter, to get in an organization like this, or if you're in a different state, one of those bow hunting organizations, the learning curve that you can skip by getting with these people that have done it forever and becoming friends with them is second to none. And
it's amazing.
There's just no substitute for it. You can't, unless you're fortunate and have, like, really good friends and family that are great bow hunters, getting in an organization like this can literally change your bow hunting life. So
yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because that's something I noticed going to my first two conventions. You really up the level of your company, if that makes sense. I know that old saying, if you're ever the smartest person in the room, you want to find a different room. I'll tell you, there are some true killers that are part of Bowhunters of Wyoming that you can learn so much from. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there, talking about that passion that we as bow hunters bring to the sport, and in turn bring to the organization, because I'll use myself as an example. I hunt with a recurve. I hunt with a compound as well, but I'm also a traditional hunter, and the amount of time it takes to stay proficient at traditional archery is ridiculous. Not saying I'm proficient in any sense of the word, but I know that if I set my rifle down, I can pick it up next year, put a couple rounds through it, get my zero back, and be relatively good to go. Whereas if I do that with a recurve bow, I'm going to look like I just picked up a bow for the first time in my life, even though it's only been 5 or 6 months. And I think, like you said, a lot of the guys in this organization bring that same passion to the organization. And it was really cool for me to see not only, I guess, the sense of family, for lack of a better term, but also the fact that we're getting a pretty big seat at the table, considering how relatively small we are. I know I've gone to several Type 9 meetings throughout the state, season-setting meetings, and every single time I'm there, there's at least somebody from Bowhunters of Wyoming, which is which is awesome to see. Kind of going off the hunting stuff now, Tom, I want to switch gears a little bit because spring bear's right around the corner. I'm super jacked to get out in the woods with my bow. How did you get started in bow hunting, and how young were you?
Yeah, so I kind of mentioned it a little bit earlier, but I did grow up elk hunting, but just rifle elk hunting, and primarily driving over to Jackson to hunt the late season migration for cow elk to feed our family, and that's just what we did with my dad for years and years and years. And then when I went to college, I met Sam and Zach, and they were bow hunting. And quick story of what really got me hooked is another guy, he's not part of BOW, but one of our group of friends up here is a really good bow hunter. His name's Kenny, and he needed somebody to go up. We were in college, and he had a Area 41 elk tag up in the Bighorns and wanted somebody to go with him in case he got one. So I was like, heck yeah, I'll go bow hunting, middle of September. And we got up there. As soon as we stepped out of the door of his truck, a bull bugled. And I was like, I remember telling him I was so excited. I was like, dude, we're going to get one. And he was like, he'd been bow hunting since he was little.
Right.
He's like, yeah, dude, there's more to it than hearing a bugle, like to get an elk. He's like, that's not how this works.
That's not the end game.
Yeah, we waited for sunup, and about 15 or 20 minutes after sunup, he shot a small bull head on at about 8 yards, and he ran out about 10 yards and tipped over dead. And I was just like, I told you we were going to get one. This is awesome. And I was jacked up, and I pretty much sealed it. So I got pretty lucky. My first bow hunting trip went about as awesome as it could go. And
yeah, that sounds awesome. There's no coming back from that, was there?
No, yeah. I got a bow ordered probably that week and started shooting, and that's what got me hooked.
Heck yeah, that's an awesome story. Yeah, there's no second guessing after watching something like that. So since that time, Tom, and kind of bringing us to present day, over those years of bow hunting, have you noticed any big changes in the bow hunting landscape over the years, specifically in Wyoming?
Oh yeah, I mean, hunting is always changing, and obviously the technology, the access, everyone can find spots, the places when I was in my 20s that we could go hunt, even just right here in the Bighorns, and never see anybody, or maybe see one person. There's people all over it. There's just not that many hidey holes left. It's just such a popular sport. It's one of those things you hate to cuss it, when you see everyone out there. But yeah, it's like, well, it's good. So it's just changed. Everyone can get everywhere. Everyone has 4-wheelers and side-by-sides and Onyx, and then we all have spotting scopes. And, I'm saying here, so I'm not, I'm same as everyone else. And
right.
We're just, the technology's gotten there, and everyone's so proficient. Or a lot of people are getting very proficient with their bows. And so, calling, when we first started bow hunting, it was early enough that calling was just kind of becoming big. And, the high pressure units you still could call decently too, but just watching that change of, our group of friends, we don't call a lot for elk. We call a little bit, some locating and stuff, but, back when I started, man, we were setting up and calling elk in, and not that I haven't done that, but I do a lot less of it now, just from the calling pressure and things that have evolved over the years. So it's changed, but I try not to get too negative on it, because every year I've had a chance to, I've had 2 terrible years in a row.
We won't bring that up.
Pretty good stretch going for a while. And, but I've had opportunities. Like, I've had chances to kill 6-point bull elk basically every single year I've bow hunted. And it's like, how much more can I ask for? Could it be better? Sure. Man, it's pretty dang good. So
yeah, and for those who bow hunt, they realize what a big deal that is. But for those who don't bow hunt elk often, I think a lot of people, it's lost on them how big of a deal it is just to get an opportunity at a mature bull consistently. I mean, that's a victory in and of itself.
Yeah, and that's, and I try to remind myself of that. Like, I did have a really good stretch of success there, and then the last couple of years I've been a little pickier on stuff. I did use the trad bow last year, so that didn't help my success rate, but it was a blast. And it's like, I also, at this point in my bow hunting career, I don't need to kill something every year. Kind of when you're new, fresh and stuff, like, you just have to. I don't care anymore so much if I do. I mean, I want to, don't get me wrong, but I really enjoy the experience and getting close and, trying to do it on my terms. And so, I'm getting, I guess, old enough now. I'm starting to feel like an old man. I'm not even 40 yet, but it's coming. And I enjoy it differently than I used to. So
I think that's a good place to be too, because I know, speaking from my own experience, when you're in your early 20s, late teens, and you're in the woods, the whole success of the hunt hinges upon whether or not you kill something, right? You go out there and you don't kill anything, it's a failure. At least it was to me when I was in that, initial stages of elk hunting, whereas now, don't get me wrong, I want to shoot an elk. I want to shoot an elk badly.
Yeah.
But that's not the primary, I guess, measure of success, right? Did I have a good time in the field? Was I able to spend time with the people I like spending time with in the mountains? Oh, man, then that's a win in and of itself. Shooting something is just icing on the cake. So
yeah,
I know you brought up elk a lot, Tom, and that leads me to one of my questions for you. Favorite species to hunt? I'm going to go out on a limb, and I'm going to guess elk, but I could be wrong. What is it?
It probably is. I have a hard time with that because I really love big mule deer, too.
Yes.
The experience, I would say shooting a big mule deer, killing a big mule deer is really hard to beat, especially because there's fewer and fewer of them out there.
Yeah, it's just so hard.
And so that might be the pinnacle when you get one. But as far as the overall hunt, man, it's hard to pass up elk in the mountains. Like, it's just the whole thing. It's a grind. It's fun. You're chasing bugling bulls. Friends and family are around a lot of time. Like, it's just such an accomplishment, getting them out, the pack outs, the whole thing. So it probably has to be elk. That's
a good answer. Yeah, there's just so much that goes into elk hunting that makes it such an awesome experience. Because I'm with you. I think if I had to pick, I'd pick elk, and for all those reasons you just mentioned. Speaking of that, do you have like a most memorable hunt? Is there any, when you look back? I know for me at least, it seems like every hunt stands out in some way, shape, or form because I love it so much. But when you look back on all your hunts, is there any one that kind of pops out or stands out?
Yeah, so I was thinking about that question and like what I would do with that. And the hunt that just kept popping into my mind is funny because it's an elk hunt and it's not a big bull. It's I don't know what he is. Maybe a 300-inch, maybe a little bit less.
That's pretty big to me, Tom.
Well, yeah, but he's no giant. He's not a 350 bull or something like crazy. Right. He's a good bull, good 6-point. But I ended up hitting him bad. Not terrible, but it was a single high lung. I thought I shot him good. 30 yards, 33 yards, something like that. Shot him. I was filming at the time. I had a GoPro on and I was watching. I thought I stroked him, and everything felt good, but I hit him a little bit high and back from where I wanted to be, and I got a high single lung on him. Didn't know it. Watched my video. I went up to find blood, found my arrow, and it only had the tip broke off with about 8 inches of arrow missing. And that's when I knew. I was like, oh no. And I looked for blood for a little bit and I never found blood. So I went back, watched it, downloaded the video onto my phone for my GoPro, watched it. Thought I could see the arrow, wasn't sure. I actually walked out, back to my truck, drove back to town, threw it up on the TV because I shot him right away early in the morning. I wasn't super far in. So get all the way out, watch it on TV. I'm like, yeah, I can see the shot. Well, what I saw was not the shot. The GoPros aren't great for seeing. Yeah. So I go back in and trying to blood trail, nothing. End up gritting. I was hands and knees for a couple hours. Just super frustrated. Never found a drop of blood. Not one single drop. So then I started gritting. We're in just like old growth timber, pine needles, no grass or anything on the floor. And I was getting ready to quit. I was just sweating and coming back up out of a small drainage, back to my pack and stuff where I took the shot. And I just happened to see on a little twig a speck of blood, just a pinprick of blood. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. Picked it up. I was like, that is definitely blood. So I flagged it, went and got my stuff. Came back down there. There was a one set of tracks on a little bit of a diagonal from the rest of the elk tracks in there because he was with a pretty big herd. Mm-hmm. And I followed those out, hands and knees for a while. I started to run out daylight and was walking those tracks out. And I saw that. I walked up on the bull. It was 66 yards away. All I could see was brown between about a 6 or 8 inch gap in some trees. And he started picking his head up. The wind was blowing right at him. And I just knew I had to make a very, very difficult shot. And it's probably the best shot I've ever made. I didn't know exactly where I was going to hit him because I just had that window and it was brown.
Right. Trying to get an arrow in.
But I could tell he was sick for my first arrow. And so I let it rip and he blew out of his bed. And that whack of that broadhead, I swore I just assumed it hit a tree and I screwed it up. And I walked down there hanging my head thinking I just lost a bull and wounded him. And I was so mad. And I got down there and somehow I heart shot him in his bed without knowing it. And he went about 12 feet and piled up dead. And it was just one where I've never worked so hard on a blood trail. Well, wasn't a blood trail, on a track, and just stayed persistent and did all the things I needed to do to find that bull. I mean, I crawled around for 4 hours probably on hands and knees trying to find blood, and gritted and walked and just happened to get a little bit lucky and found that speck of blood and thought I had a track and tracked it out, dry tracked it. I think it was about 700 or 800 yards of dry track on him.
That's a hell of a dry track.
Yeah, luckily it was really thick pine needles and he was going against the grain just enough that I could see in those thick pine needles that track. And so it was probably it was just like it really left an imprint on me. That was like 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago or something like that. And then all my buddies, Sam, Zach, and Kenny, my Sheridan crew, they all ran up that evening and we all packed it out. It's the only elk we've all packed out together as friends.
Oh, so that made it even better.
We've all packed a lot of elk out for each other, but never as a group. And so
all at the same time.
It was a pretty easy pack out. It wasn't, terrible pack out or anything, but it was just cool. I worked really hard to get that bull and stayed persistent with it. And then all the buddies came, we packed it out. So it was a pretty cool hunt.
Heck yeah. Well, you touched on something too, the working hard and being persistent. And oftentimes I think with bow hunting, the harder we work, the luckier we get. And I think that's an excellent example of it. So I guess, with that, working out the way it worked out, is there any advice you would give to new hunters based on your experiences with that hunt? Anything you would tell people that are just getting into the game?
Yeah, and this maybe this was the hunt because we've been talking about it with our group of friends. We just did the in-class bow hunter ed class, and we were talking with some of the
nice.
There was a bunch of kids in it, and we talked about this. So maybe that's why this resonated with me right now. But it's the blood trailing that I think, talking with some of the older guys in BOW and my experiences and everything, the guys that are super successful, that all you see is the pictures or hear the stories or see their trophy room and they have all the animals and everything. You get to talking to those guys. And one thing I have just seen consistently is those guys are the best blood trackers you will find. Not every shot goes as we want. We all practice and try to make good shots, but it doesn't. I have no idea why a 30-yard shot, I hit him high single lung with a compound bow. Like I should have stroked that elk in the heart. And something whatever happened. And I had to trail, I'd use everything in me to be able to find that bull. And you just hear these stories over and over. So I think if you have never had to blood trail things, you need to try and go with people, and blood trail stuff. And really, I don't know what kind of resources are out there online for it. It's such a hard thing to do without having to do it.
It really is.
Get in Bowhunters of Wyoming or a bow hunting organization and pick the brains of those guys that have done it successfully for decades. There's little tips and tricks and things that you can do, but it's going slow. And Sam Davis, my buddy, he said it at the that bow hunter ed class. He says it all the time, but you hunt that blood trail. And that's just the best way to put it is you don't just go walking down, hoping, it's not always a giant blood trail and you're going to find them. And sometimes there's a really good blood trail and then it dries up. And so don't take it for granted. Go slow and literally hunt that blood trail like you're stalking an animal. Go slow, pay attention to everything around you, and just take your time, and you will be more successful as a bow hunter.
I like that. Hunt that blood trail, because oftentimes, and I'm sure you see it and I see it too, is you get the newer hunters who hear the term blood trail and they just assume there's always going to be blood. But as your story pointed out, sometimes you're going to have to dry track. You're going to have to dry track that blood trail for a long ways. And like you said, 700-800 yards, which is substantial. Sometimes, you're not always going to have that blood.
Yeah. And and some of it's going to be the school of hard knocks and, maybe some luck in there and stuff, but just the things you look for. And, you start learning where animals go and how they behave when they're hit.
Right.
It's too much to just go through in a podcast, but, the little sprays of blood, like you're not always looking for big drops or pools of blood. Like if they're hit a high lung, they might be misting out blood when they're breathing out, or, up in their diaphragm and stuff. They might be misting just like almost like a light spray paint of blood as they go past trees and bushes and stuff. And so there's just all these things you can look for that, you just don't think of until somebody shows you, or you, School of Hard Knocks, figure it out the hard way. So I think that's the biggest thing that can help. Everyone can learn to shoot, everyone, all the things, but if you want to find those animals, you got to get good at blood tracking.
Yeah, and I think everything you said tracks 100%. I think that's one of those fields where experience is the best teacher, because sometimes, and I'm speaking from experience here, you might not have blood at all. I remember a bull I shot, I think it was 3 years ago. I kind of split the front shoulder, really worked it right in that front shoulder. A Texas heart shot, I think, is what some people call it. And I was above him, so that arrow came down at an angle, hit him. He spun off and ran. When I went down to where I had shot him, I found 2/3 of my arrow broken off with no blood on it, and no blood at all down his tracks. And I was, the emotional roller coaster you get going on. And I was in the Valley of Valleys, and then I just started gridding that drainage with my brother-in-law, and he were kind of side by side, and we're doing our grids, and I just hear him go, "Hey, Alex, your bull's right here." And sure enough, he had died. He didn't even make it 23 yards, I think it was, but not a single drop of blood, because sometimes they'll die before they even get a chance to bleed, or if you hit that high double lung, it'll take a while for those lungs to fill up with blood. But I think that was a great thing to hit on as far as those newer guys getting into the game. What's the difference between the good and the great hunters, right? There's always something that separates those two groups. Before we kind of wrap this up, Tom, because I could talk all night long, I want to hit you with some rapid fire questions here. So, fixed or mechanical broadheads, what are you shooting?
I shoot mechanical for accuracy.
I like it. Compound or traditional?
Compound. Last year was my first year with traditional, and I'll be doing more traditional going forward, but so far mostly compound.
Right on. Hardest animal to hunt, in your opinion?
I think it really depends on your standards and what terrain you're hunting them in, but I'd say trophy mule deer.
I got to agree with that one. They're a whole different animal. 200-inch muley or 400-inch elk? Which one are you choosing? That one's a tough one, I know.
Yeah, it's a tough one. Feel like a 400-inch elk, as improbable as it is almost more probable now than a 200-inch muley. So I might have to say 200-inch mule deer.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it might have been a little different back when the muleys were in their heydays up in the grays and whatnot, but it's kind of a different world now. Last one, dream hunt. Where are you going? Anywhere, any weapon, any animal? What are you picking? Yeah,
probably Alaskan grizz or possibly Alaskan moose, but Alaska, and I think grizz probably, but I need to get a moose at some point. I won't catch the points probably. So unless I get lucky, it might be an Alaskan moose that or the grizz, and definitely with my bow.
I can't knock either of those answers. You got any final anything you want to say on Bowhunters of Wyoming or just conservation in general before we wrap it up?
Just join BOW if you're listening to this, or have friends. Get your friends to join. It's a really important organization, and if you're on a different state listening, join your local one too. You can join as a non-resident if you come out here and hunt. We have non-resident members. We have quite a few of them actually.
Yeah.
But join these organizations and get involved. Check it out for a year or two, scout it out, get comfortable with it, and just step up. You're a perfect example of it. I mean, you stepped up right away, and now you're president. And you don't all have to do that, but just join these organizations. They're important, and they're going to be an asset to you as well.
Yeah, it's well said. We as hunters are always stronger together, especially in today's day and age. Where can people find you, Tom? You got Facebook, Instagram? I'm terrible at social media, but I figure I better ask you.
Yeah, I do. Facebook and Instagram. I don't do a whole lot on there anymore. I kind of got wrapped up in a few years back trying to put all my hunting stuff. And, for a minute there, I thought maybe I'll try to get into the hunting industry, and it really ruined hunting for me. And I caught myself trying to film and take pictures more than I was hunting, and I just
kind of lost sight of the goal.
Yeah. And so I don't do much on there, but I am on there. I do a lot of stories and stuff of what I got going on. I just don't post a lot or do much, but I'm on there. I think it's YO Hurley is my Instagram, and just my name on Facebook. I really don't do much on Facebook. I use that more for family, but I'm on there. If you want to follow me or reach out, I'm happy to talk bow hunting with anyone.
Right on. And if you guys want to find us at Bowhunters of Wyoming, we're at bowhuntersofwyoming.org. And you can get a hold of us, all our email addresses and phone numbers on there if you guys want to reach out. And I encourage you to do so, and I encourage you to join. So, Tom, thanks again, man. That was awesome. Like I said, I could have talked for another 3 hours. But
yeah,
in both our best interests, we better not. So, man, I appreciate you hopping on, and we'll have to link back up after the season and see what shakes out for each of our respective hunts.
You bet. Sounds good. And thanks for stepping up. And I'm excited to see where we go with you as president.
I appreciate you, Tom. Thanks, man. Have a good night.
You too.